but there it is. Like, what do we think about it? There's stars. I mean, it's not to be mean, but the rating is just like, what do I think about this? I'm in between. So you can rate it with the stars. You can add a comment about it, just to kind of share. So if there's anybody that wants to share out now about what they think about the current definition, like just out loud, that'd be a great way to start.
Yeah, I think what I got at first glance of the new definition is that the emphasis is more a reflection on us as community practitioners. And what are the things that we're doing that may contribute to oppression, which is, I think, a big change from past practice that looked at the over analytical perspective of oppressed communities.
Yeah. Yep. It absolutely does look at us, and also, groups in power, like all the way up, and for us, it's really also a big effort. Part of what we talked about was teasing out practice from practitioner, because they're not one and the same. And that's such an important part of it, because the practice and what's good practice lands differently based on the intentionality of the practitioner. And so we got to make sure that as we think about practice, or what we're trying to do is think about practice completely apart from the practitioner. And then when we combine the two, making sure that, the practitioner's role comes in. But yes, please.
Yeah, I've actually wondered about that across multiple definitions before. Is we talk about systems change, which is really important, and then we talk about organizational and on individual change. It's almost as if groups don't exist unless it's an organization or a sum of individuals. And to me, it's like, well, you're missing the community part of it, which could be any kind of group.
I love it. Did you write that?
No.
Please. That's so important. Oh yeah.
Okay,
That's so important. Good. What else? Do we need to say anything else about the practice definition before we move on to we could just talk about it in addition to these next two, like what needs to be added to the new definition to make it more contemporary? What would you add? Somebody said empowerment, Crystal. Oh, that's in another group. Oh, that's you.
That's me.
Why did you say that?
I don't know, it just feels like empowerment is such a central theme throughout psychology generally, and I think empowerment captures some of that. I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me. Like when I took community psychology as an undergrad, what stuck with me from that class was the idea that we don't empower people, but we help them find the tools so that they can empower themselves. So like taking this shift away from like kind of blaming the victim, kind of like we're going to put this on you, or we're going to come in and swoop in and do this for you. And really kind of focusing on like the power that people have within communities to affect change, to affect their own lives. And so to me, like being able to capture that, I think will be a good thing.
I really like that. Hi, Jerry. And
yeah, hey, I got kicked out, so yeah. All kind of stuff going on. What's going on?
We're talking about the definition of community psych practice over here to the left. Oh, wait, there's a Padlet. Let me share the link in our chat. Because we have this Padlet that we're kind of focusing on, and it's guiding us. So let me paste that.
It's actually on the topic. Oh, never mind. It just
disappeared. Is it there?
It disappeared.
Oh, it's still in my chat. I still have the main chat.
Yeah, I think it's in the main chat, but I think Stephanie just shared it with us again. Great. But yeah,
do you see it, Jerry?
No.
I'm gonna send a message directly to you.
Okay. In the chat, right?
In the chat.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so, yeah, so we're just trying to look at the old definition. Once you get the Padlet open, you'll be able to see all of that. Once you click on that link, you'll be able to see what we're working off of.
Okay.
And we're talking about not old, but the definition that Julian put forth in 2006, ways that we can add it on. I like the idea of empowerment, Crystal. I wonder if you could say what you said. Like,
like stick it in the thing.
Yeah, because that's a really good part about not swooping in. I like that a lot, and just because it also gets to our intentionality and the way that we feel about our role. And I actually the the definition is a little different here. But before we get to the new one, it's a little different than what we showed in the
Okay.
PowerPoint.
Got
Like,
you.
you got it, Jerry?
Yeah, I
Okay,
got it up.
perfect. And you can make comments, and I hope that you will.
Okay, yes.
Yes, and just add in new stuff. So like then thinking, in addition to thinking about the definition and what needs to be added to make the new definition more contemporary,
Yes.
what are we getting right in terms of the old definition? And then what do you like about the old definition? Like, so someone says promoting well-being, justice, and equity. I think that's good. You know, so what do you like that you're like, okay, whatever you do with the new definition or whatever we conceptualize in a new approach we need to keep, blah, blah, blah. That's what we would do there. And so I don't want to, before we move to the new definition, I just want to make sure that we are getting everything that we want to say about it. So, Tracy or August or Oya or Tyler, is there anything that anybody wanted to say about the other one before we move over to the new one?
Well, two things. This is Tracy, I'm sorry. So
Hi, Tracy.
the strengthening the capacity, of course, I like and needs to stay, but I think the term constituents just seems so cold, so labeling, because who are the constituents?
Mm-hmm. Do you have access to the Padlet, or should I type this in for you?
I have access. I'm typing it in right now.
Yay. Okay, great. Because I'm so afraid that somebody's going to say something cool and it's not going to make it on there for reflection later on.
Right. So I do want to share about the old definition. When I first saw it, what it brings up for me is it seems to be constructed from the point of view of the person or the group community psychologist going into a community as the savior, so to speak. That what comes up for me right this minute, it represents to me the savior mentality.
Yes. Could you say more about that? And also when you finish, type it in the.
Yes. So when we say to strengthen the capacity of communities to meet the needs of constituents and help them to realize their dreams, how are you, that already says to me, when you say help them to realize their dreams, it already speaks to an outside or external point of view. When we say help them, it's just the framing of the language, the way the language is framed. It just resonates for me, not a collaboration or not a, and I challenge the word empowerment actually. So I don't want to even say that. I don't think that the new definition should have empowerment in it. But yeah, so I've saw it before, and the first thing that came up for me, it's not indigenous, it's not, it just still reflects a framework of colonialism, basically.
Very much, I agree.
Very much,
it feels that way. And so with that articulation, which is I agree with 1000%, Jerry, and 1000%, which is kind of the reason, some of the logic behind revisiting. So here's a proposed, it's a new proposed draft definition that really needs to be ripped apart unapologetically. So like, there's nothing there that any one of us would feel like attached to. So applying the principles of community psych across a full scope of communities, including centers of power where oppression sometimes has its origin, as well as communities dominated by oppression, and all other spaces expressing a desire for collaboration, using a variety of methodologies with the intention of accessing and utilizing strengths to promote wellness, positive change, and/or the dismantling of dominant and unhealthy systems.
This is the newer one.
This is the newer one that's in draft.
I didn't understand it.
So like the key, so and if there's anything that should be reworded, and I'm sure there is, I would be sad if no one did, so the key here is we want to make sure that people think about the communities that we work with, that the connotation isn't just the disadvantaged, because oftentimes it's the powerful and the communities that are wealthy and usually assumed to be well that need work, if not the most work, because they're the ones creating the systems and the oppression and the horrible situations. We need only look at the kids in cages and who put them there to think about
Gotcha.
the dynamic. So if we say to ourselves, well, we're usually only studying those populations. I mean, there's psychologists there now, or the kids in cages. Who's talking to the person who made the decision to put kids in cages to understand what's happening there and accompany them through that pathology? So it's thinking about opening up the scope of what we do, as opposed to just kind of this do-gooder, benevolent, kind of like, person that comes in, to help these poor disadvantaged communities, and really positioning themselves ultimately, whether they know it or not, as a buffer between those that do them harm and the harmed. And even sometimes sustain it, like getting out of that mode and thinking about the full breadth, both working inside of the communities that are powerful and usually don't get pathologized, even though they are pathological, and accompanying those folks through their pathology towards less oppressive behaviors that in turn land on the oppressed. And so then, but at the same time, working with the disadvantaged or oppressed populations when they express a desire for such a collaboration, to come in and try to do whatever it is that we can to lend help without the presumption that we are the scientifically superior or in some way the greater intellect.
Hey, Ericka, can you share your screen to show us the statement? I feel like it's hard to give input when we're not looking at it.
Yes, and we also have a link to the Padlet, which is what everybody's kind of looking at and contributing to. And I would hope that you would get on there too, because I would love for you to be able to add your inputs, so that, because everybody's kind of adding their ideas there. But I don't have the PowerPoint, but I'm gonna open up to the old definition. Oh, it's right there. I'll copy it and paste it in the chat. The old one and the new one.
Okay.
So well, you know the old one, so I'll just open up the new one and put that in the chat. So this is the new kind of definition we're working with in the chat there to think about. And so anybody have any thoughts about the new one and what they would change or add, or what we need to, anything at all? And what we're getting wrong, what you would add, especially. Unapologetically ferocious, please, because, we've got a lot of great minds here.
It's all one sentence.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I would change is like, I think Jerry, you said it was hard to follow. Like, I think in part because it's sort of going on and on and on. And I think it needs to be sort of separated out into probably 2 or 3 sentences.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. What else? That's a good one.
I mean, there's sort of a natural break in terms of like the first part in, what you're including. The first part is like what you're including, the full scope, including X, ABC. And then the second part is about more about sort of process, right? Methodology and intention. So there's a natural break.
Yeah, that seems useful to break it up some so that it can be digestive. But in terms of like the content, is there any idea that's missing or something that's important is it too one-sided? Oh no, we have 118 seconds. Like anything that you guys feel like, oh, well, this is good, but it's missing, or I don't know about this at all, or.
Of the new one, I don't know about it at all. I would sit with it and digest it. I don't know, it's something doesn't just say, oh, that's powerful, you know.
Right. What are some of the things that could be added in to make it really hit better?
I mean, what about policy? Should there be anything in there about policy? Changing policy?
About changing policy. Policy for at what level?
Well, any level. I mean, you're sort of talking about wanting to make wanting to address these issues, right, of oppression and power. But part of it is, right, there's sort of practices, and then there's also policies that sort of promote oppression and inequities.
Mm-hmm. So adding policy. Mm-hmm.
When we say strength in this, is it obvious that we're talking about assets and strength of the community?
Oh.
Okay.
Utilize the methodology.
Oh, no, it is not obvious. Thank
We
you.
can make it a little more strength-based and bottom-up. And I definitely going back, my computer froze. And so, but I wanted to comment on Jerry's, I'm 100% on that. When you were criticizing the first one, it wasn't strength-based enough for me.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, that first one definitely doesn't come from bottoms up. It definitely is still framed from top down.
Well, but does anyone have a burning comment or thought or question that they want to expand on that's already in the Padlet or that hasn't gotten written in?
Or a summary? Does anybody want to do a summary of our group? Because we had a lot of good comments.
And Jerry was in the middle of something cool and just got cut off.
Is it helpful for me to continue to share the screen, or is it more distracting and you want to just see each other?
Maybe see each other. Everybody should have access to the Padlet, I think.
Sanja or Gloria or anybody, do you want to kind of give an overview of what we said? Our collective views?
Sure. We talked about the aspect of the original definition that mentioned realizing the dream, and from that went into a conversation about kind of how it resonated with the feel of community psychologists coming in to help the folks that are being helped, or the folks that we are working with, to realize or access something as if they had some sort of deficit in the first place. And so wanted to include language more about recognizing the assets that they bring to the table, the awareness, and highlighting the partnership aspect that community psychologists are coming in to partner with communities to define strengths, to define their assets, to define pathways towards well-being, or how to promote that well-being as well. And I know I'm missing some stuff. There's another point that I think Dario made that was very helpful. You can jump in. I think it's Dario, if you want to share that point, because I thought it was.
I think, yeah, no, when we were activating that sort of like the language of using dream, and like how it sort of like was thematic to like American dream or like Western notions of wellness, and pathologizing like illness onto communities that we believe are foreign to like us being like the general like practitioners, and foreign being like perhaps communities that are marginalized or like not completely clinically understood as a result of our lens of, you know, Western notions of wellness.
And also recognizing that we're learning in the process too, that we grow with those with whom we partner.
Yeah, that was a big theme, the reciprocity, that we're kind of, both of the definitions are, I don't know, there's still something in there that people were sensing that's saying we're providing gifts, but not necessarily talking about how we're benefiting and growing, and the reciprocity of it all.
And did that get written in the Padlet?
Yep.
Oh, great.
That's just what I was thinking. I was scrambling to write that down, but yeah, that's good.
Yeah, we got it all down. I was typing in there when people were talking.
Jerry, you were making a point that I really was interested in hearing the end of, if you didn't mind.
No, refresh me, Ericka, what were we referring to?
Well, you said that what I know Susan was talking about maybe adding in policy. And then from there, you were saying something, your initial statement was about how it just didn't seem to go hard enough, like if I'm paraphrasing you properly, and that there might be something that just feels off still.
Yeah, it actually still feels off, and without really sitting and really digesting it, what came up right away was the first line using principles of CP. So in challenging the principles of CP, this just reminds me of an article we have coming out, or hopefully coming out in the Global Journal, around decolonizing community psychology. And one of the concerns, I think, when it comes, so number one is, what principles are we talking about, right? And if we're talking about like sense of community, you know, so principles, I guess we're talking about like research, maybe this participatory action, etc. So it's something about all of that that I think all of us are hoping to change in Brad is saying critical reflex. Yes, something about the principles of CP, because I think many of us are no longer ascribing to them. Like, for one, empowerment, the term empowerment, right? So if you know, without really thinking about it and going further in depth, if that's just on the surface level, so if that's true, right, and we're you know, coming up with something new, what does that really look like without, do we bring along the old into the new? And I'm not saying we don't, right? I'm just throwing some questions out there. And if that's true, does the old dominate the new? And it's just sort of like an add-on versus a intersection versus a intermingling of old and new, so to speak. I don't see enough of how new community psychologists are thinking in either definition. Definitely, you know, we're saying the old one is out, but even the new one seems to not reflect that thought, you know, the new school of thought, so to speak.
Is it mainly the attachment to the community psych principles, or does it go beyond that in the language? So like if the top line were, if it wasn't bringing along, which that's an amazing and really great point, I support 1000% and didn't even consider. So if it wasn't bringing along the old CP principles, what if that was lobbed off? What else might, and this is for everyone, but you know, what else might change inside of what we've got there?
So I'm trying to think about some of the things we talked about in that article. We talked about even Eurocentric curriculums, so to speak. We you know, even how, you know, what does a new definition include that says we don't, or we are looking to decolonize Eurocentric curriculums, even in community psychology, right? And I think we're all in agreement, not enough BIPOC voices are in the whole community psych field in general, if that makes sense. You know, as I'm thinking through it and without really sitting, you know, and delving into it and getting it clear, I'm kind of throwing out more themes than I am something specific, right? But hopefully that's something too.
Mashoud had a point. You mentioned empowerment earlier and sort of the difficulty of that term. Mashoud had a point related to empowerment. I don't know if now would be a good time to make that one, Mashoud.
I was just saying, I think similar to what Gerard is saying, that you know, using empowerment when we're practicing it doesn't work. You know, specifically in the community where I practice, refugee community, where it is the NGO that is using the empowerment over the refugee, because there's no refugee at the table making decision. Yet when they say they are empowering the refugee, you know. So I'm thinking like, how does that even work? How do we use it? And it's part of what I'm learning as a community psychologist. At least it's part of the training I've been getting. So the question that I keep asking is, instead of the empowerment, I change it to using accompaniment, you know, because I know we can follow people from one junction to the other and hold their hand, instead of saying we are using empowerment, which I don't get it. So that's what I was sharing.
Thank you. So you're talking about accompaniment. That's the term that you just mentioned?
Yes.
Great.
And it's interesting, Mashoud actually challenged me to think about accompaniment through the lens of kind of where it got its origins from. And when I looked at those ideas, I found like liberation psychology from, Black psychologists in South America at the origins there, and accompaniment being kind of an offshoot of that, or a way to make those ideas accessible to other groups. And so I really appreciate looking at accompaniment and liberation psychology as well, and trying to find a way to make that a part of this.
I think of the new definition as an external way of community psychology, but are we still looking at the assets of the community psychologists? Like I could speak for myself. I'm 100% artist. And in community psychology, I want to be able to bring those assets into the field to make the field, expand. Does the new definition allow room for the assets of the community psychologists?
That's deep.
It could maybe do more. What could we change about the part where it says, all other spaces expressing a desire for collaboration using a variety of methodologies? Could that statement, a variety of methodologies, do more to speak to what you're talking about, Grishma?
If I could be transparent, it still sounds very quantitative heavy, maybe a little qualitative, but it still doesn't welcome, different platforms of human thought. I think that's what Berner talks about. How can you use human thought as how can you use human thought as a tool to express something? Do I make sense?
Yeah, and I'm hoping that your intentionality might come across either on the Padlet or somewhere, or just an email or something, like to make sure that the language gets right. Because, and then it's also interesting to think about, like, how long should it be? Is there a limit? Like, can it just go on and on, or should it be succinct? Because I think that every single thing that was mentioned here is important, but it's a definition that will hopefully have a home somewhere within our work. And so what should it look like? But making sure that it's authored in some way by those who are thinking about these ideas, most presently, specifically the role of the community psychologist from a standpoint of being an artist or whatever other status they hold.
Yeah, no, you make a good point, because I think even Tiffany brought this up. She mentioned that community psychology is very practice heavy, right? But so if we're really practice heavy, why are we not advocating for practice heavy, fill in the blank, dissertation, thesis, projects,
But then we have to ask, I'm dominating, but this is the last thing I'm gonna say, I'm gonna stop talking. Then we have to ask, are we making sure that we're talking about community practice, and what is community practice? To Jerry's point, if we're going to start off linking it to the principles, I guess in some way it has to talk about the principles. Would that be separate from how it's used, or should it, because it's part of our effort has been like detangling it, practitioner from practice. Do you all think that they should be detangled, or that they should be inherently intertwined?
That's what the space is, right? For that voice, for that dialogue, for that respect and reciprocity.
I'm also kind of struggling a little bit, especially hearing Grishma's, statement. You know, is this an ideal definition or is it a real definition? Because I saw a couple of people, including myself, when it's like we're a practice community, a couple of people raised their eyebrows like, are we? Is community psychology practice oriented? Because I don't feel like it is. I feel very, very much within, especially within SCRA, that it's very research oriented. And I don't necessarily feel like practitioners or educators are supported. So is this a real definition or is it an ideal definition? And I've been kind of wrangling with that as I've been listening to folks talk.
So just to push back a little bit on that, Crystal. So what you said is you're not seeing practitioners or educators being supported. I'm wondering who is being supported. I feel like we're made up of practitioners and educators primarily.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of, like, for instance, there was a recent research award, or like a fellowship that was announced, but it was only for people at graduate institutions. Like that kind of stuff. What does a graduate institution do? It does a lot of research, right? And that's not to say that graduate institutions don't also do practice and stuff, but like the majority of community psychologists are not at R1 institutions or R2 institutions. They're elsewhere. They're in the community. They're at smaller undergraduate only institutions, stuff like that, right? And so that's where I see that tension often arise, because I, as somebody that's not at a PhD granting institution, I see a lot of opportunities closed for me personally. And I know from speaking to practitioners that they feel that even more doors are closed for them within SCRA, not necessarily community psychology, because SCRA is not the only place where people can do community psychology. So that's kind of what I mean by
Okay,
that.
yeah,
Is
thanks.
that it seems like there's this kind of elevation of research over practice and action and education a lot of times.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely one of the key goals of this process that we're going through, is to try to dismantle and get rid of that hierarchy, and recognize that the vast majority, and I think it's aspirational in the sense of what we want it to be, but I think it's also more accurate to real than what an older definition might have been. So by elevating research as what community psychology is, that's actually it's not reflective of the reality of the majority of community psychology. So we want a definition that is reflective of the majority and also pushes us towards where we want to go.
I mean, as a new community psychologist, it's my understanding that what we are is we work in a space where research meets practice, and maybe that needs to be reflected and just stated explicitly or in some form that that kind of addresses this idea of where here's a researcher, here's a practitioner, but we work in the middle there where the two come together. I think that's the intent.
I agree. Like theory and praxis shouldn't necessarily be mutually exclusive. They inform each other and feed off each other, and then create an output where social change or other kinds of things create positive outcomes.
And that's exactly what we're trying to get across in the paper, that we're using praxis as involving the kind of combination of science and practice and talking to community members and collaborating and reflecting and engaging in action, and that all of that is kind of wrapped up. We want all of those competencies to be used in the right contexts, and that there's not the simple, these are the academics, they do the research, here are the practitioners. In SCRA, there's some reason to have that divide, because it's been unjust politically. But in terms of the way we work and the way we want to teach it in our programs and engage with others, we want it to be all together in a praxis, cyclical praxis.
So I see August's comment that we're out of time, but the Padlet will stay open. So if you get a thought tonight or tomorrow or whenever, if you want to go in and add it there, we'd love it. We'd appreciate it, and we'll try to incorporate it into into the paper. Thank you, everybody, for your engagement.
And thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been really good.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
This is a lot of fun.
This was awesome. We
Books are
ran out of time.
fun.
Tiffany, you can chat.
Oh, let me get it.
Yeah, we got to save all of it.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Renita. I loved your session yesterday, by the way.
Thank you. It was fun. I'm so glad you guys were all there, and it's just perfect segue to today, huh?
Absolutely.
You guys, this is an awesome session. I have a lot to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good seeing everyone.
Thanks, August.